right. Hello, my name is Sass. I work with Resources for Organizing and Social Change, and we are diving into Chapter 7 this week of The Parable of the Sower. I am going to do a screen share for folks so that people who process information better through reading can read along with us, or I'm going to try to do that. I'm not seeing it here. Hold on just a moment. So we're not going to actually screen share this week for some reason. I don't know why it is not allowing me to do that. So I'm just gonna start the recap and then I will start reading with folks. So we are starting this week in the year 2025, but to recap where we were before, the story starts in 2024. Our protagonist, Lauren, is living with a condition called hyperempathy, which causes her to physiologically experience the pain and pleasure of other people who are around her. And this is to an extreme extent, so that if somebody is injured to the point where they're bleeding, she will also bleed through her skin, but she can also feel physical joy. She lives just outside of LA in California in a post-apocalyptic environment where the only protection between her family and immense violence is a concrete wall that is lined with glass and razors. Law enforcement and emergency services cost money to use, so people don't use them too often, and potable water is very expensive. It's entirely normal to witness or experience sexual assault, murder, robbery, which brings me to what I forget sometimes to give, which is a content warning. The material in this story can be really triggering, so if you're somebody who has a hard time with graphic descriptions of violence, this might not be for you. Last week, Lauren spent a good chunk of time trying to convince her best friend that they needed to prepare for survival, including creating emergency packs and learning how to live off the land. The general feeling from the adults in her life was that it was inappropriate to scare people, and so she was reprimanded for doing that. Her dad instructed her instead to think about teaching instead of scaring. And she helps her stepmom teach kindergarten, and so she has a ready-made class of young children. Her neighborhood also starts to see an uptick in outside thieves because her neighbor who raises rabbits let his greed convince him to sell his animal goods outside their community, which alerted people that were outside the community and looking to steal that there was something worth stealing. And so the neighborhood decided to create a neighborhood watch at this point, which left us off at chapter 7, right after her dad made it clear that despite the risks, he'll shoot people who try to steal from their neighborhood. And so.
Hey, Sass.
Yes.
I found a PDF just now, so if you want to make me a host, I can try to screen share.
I love that. Hold on a second. Participant. Pull you up and make you a host so you can do it. That was Song, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. There you go.
Is it showing up?
It is. So great. We'll get started. So chapter 7. We are all God's seed, but no more or less so than any other aspect of the universe. God's seed is all there is, all that changes. Earthseed is all that spreads earth life to new earths. The universe is God's seed. Only we are Earthseed. And the destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars. Earthseed, The Books of the Living, Saturday, April 26th, 2025. Sometimes naming a thing, giving it a name or discovering its name helps one to begin to understand it. Knowing the name of a thing and knowing what that thing is for gives me even more of a handle on it. The particular God, I just lost my place, sorry. The particular God is change belief system that seems right to me will be called Earthseed. I've tried to name it before. Failing that, I've tried to leave it unnamed. Neither effort has made me comfortable. Name plus purpose equals focus for me. Well, today I found the name. Found it while I was weeding the back garden and thinking about the way plants seed themselves. Wind-born, animal-born, water-born, far from their parent plants. They have no ability at all to travel great distances under their own power, and yet they do travel. Even they don't have to just sit in one place and wait to be wiped out. There are islands thousands of miles from anywhere. The Hawaiian Islands, for example, and Easter Island, where plants seeded themselves and grew long before any humans arrived. Earthseed. I am Earthseed. Anyone can be. Someday, I think there will be a lot of us, and I think we'll have to seed ourselves farther and farther from this dying place. I've never felt that I was making any of this up. Not the name, Earthseed, not any of it. I mean, I've never felt that it was anything other than real. Discovery rather than invention. Exploration rather than creation. I wish I could believe it was all supernatural, and that I'm getting messages from God. But then I don't believe in that kind of God. All I do is observe and take notes, trying to put things down in ways that are as powerful, as simple, and as direct as I feel them. I can never do that. I keep trying, but I can't. I'm not good enough as a writer or a poet or whatever it is I need to be. I don't know what to do about that. It drives me frantic sometimes. I'm getting better, but so slowly. The thing is, even with my writing problems, every time I understand a little more, I wonder why it's taken me so long, why there was ever a time when I didn't understand things so obvious and real and true. Here's the only puzzle in it all, the only paradox, a bit of illogic or circular reasoning or whatever it should be called. Why is the universe to shape God? Why is God to shape the universe? I can't get rid of it. I've tried to change it or dump it, but I can't. I cannot. It feels like the truest thing that I've ever written. It's as mysterious and as obvious as any other explanation of God or the universe that I've ever read, except that to me, the others feel inadequate at best. All the rest of Earthseed is explanation. What God is, what God does, what we are, what we should do, what we can't help doing. Consider whether you're a human being, an insect, a microbe, or a stone. This verse is true. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. I'm going to go through my old journals and gather the verses I've written into one volume. I'll put them into one of the exercise notebooks that Corey hands out to the older kids now that there are so few computers in the neighborhood. I've written plenty of useless stuff in those books, getting my high school work out of the way. Now, I'll put one to better use. Then, someday, when people are able to pay more attention to what I say than to how old I am, I'll use these verses to pry them loose from the rotting past and maybe push them into saving themselves and building a future that makes sense. That's if everything will just hold together for a few more years. Saturday, June 7th, 2025. I've finally assembled a small survival pack for myself, a grab and run pack. I've had to dig some things I need out of the garage and the attic so that no one complains about my taking things that they need. I've collected a hatchet, for instance, and 2 small light all-metal pots. There's plenty of stuff like that around because no one throws anything away that has any possibility of someday being useful or saleable. I packed my few $100s in savings, almost 1,000. It might feed me for 2 weeks if I'm allowed to keep it. And if I'm very careful what I buy and where I buy it. I've kept up with prices, questioning Dad when he and the other neighborhood men do the essential shopping. Food prices are insane, always going up, never down. Everyone complains about them. I found an old canteen and a plastic bottle, both for water, and I resolved to keep them clean and full. I packed matches, a full change of clothes, including shoes in case I have to get up at night and run, comb, soap, toothbrush and toothpaste, tampons, toilet paper, bandages, pins, needles and thread, alcohol, aspirin, a couple of spoons and forks, a can opener, my pocket knife, packets of acorn flour, dried fruit, roasted nuts and edible seeds, dried milk, a little sugar and salt, my survival notes, several plastic storage bags, large and small, a lot of plantable raw seed, my journal, my earthseed notebook, and lengths of clothesline. I stowed all this in a pair of old pillowcases, one inside the other for strength. I rolled the pillowcases into a blanket pack and tied it with some of the clothesline so that I could grab it and run without losing things. But I made it easy to open at the top so that I could get my journal in and out. Change the water to keep it fresh, and less often, change the food and check on the seed. The last thing I wanted to find out was that instead of carrying plantable seed or edible food, I had a load of bugs and worms. I wish I could take a gun. I don't own one, and Dad won't let me keep one of his in my room. I mean to try to grab one if trouble comes, but I may not be able to. It would be crazy to wind up outside with nothing but a knife and a scared look, but it could happen. Dad and Wyatt Talcott took us for target practice today, and afterward, I tried to talk Dad into letting me keep one of the guns in my room. No, he said, sitting down, tired and dusty, behind his desk in his cluttered office. You don't have anywhere to keep it safe during the day, and the boys are always in and out of your room. I hesitated, then told him about the emergency pack that I had put together. He nodded. I thought it was a good idea back when you first suggested it, he said. But think, Lauren, it would be like a gift to a burglar. Money, food, water, a gun. Most burglars don't find what they want all bundled up and waiting for them. I think we'd better make it a little harder for any burglar who comes here to get a hold of a gun. It will just be a rolled up blanket mixed in with some other rolled or folded bedclothes in my closet, I said. No one will even notice it. No, he shook his head. No, the guns stay where they are. And that's that. I think he's more worried about the boys snooping around than about burglars. My brothers have been taught how to behave around guns all their lives, but Greg is only 8 and Ben is 9. Dad just isn't ready to put temptation in their paths yet. Marcus at 11 is more trustworthy than a lot of adults, but Keith at almost 13 is a question mark. He wouldn't steal from Dad. He wouldn't dare. But he has stolen from me. Only little things so far. He wants a gun, though, the way thirsty people want water. He wants to be all grown up yesterday. So maybe Dad's right. I hate his decision, but maybe he's right. Where would you go? I asked him, changing the subject. If we were forced out of here, where would you take us? He blew out a breath, puffing up his cheeks for a second. To the neighbors or to the college, he said. The college has temporary emergency accommodations for employees who are burned or driven out of their homes. And then? Rebuilding, fortifying, doing whatever we can do to live and to be safe. Would you ever think about leaving here, heading north to where water isn't such a problem and food is cheaper? No, he stared into space. My job down here is as secure as a job can be. There are no jobs up there. Newcomers work for food if they work at all. Experience doesn't matter. Education doesn't matter. There are just too many desperate people. They work their lives away for a sack of beans and they live on the streets. I heard it was easier up there, I said. Oregon, Washington, Canada. Closed, he said. You've got to sneak into Oregon if you're going to get in at all. Even harder to sneak into Washington. People get shot every day trying to sneak into Canada. Nobody wants California trash. But people do leave. People are always moving north. They try. They're desperate, and they have nothing to lose, but I do. This is my home. Beyond taxes, I don't owe a penny on it. You and your brothers have never known a hungry day here, and God willing, you never will. In my Earthseed notebook, I've written, a tree cannot grow in its parents' shadows. It is necessary to write. Is it necessary to write things like that? Everyone knows them. What do they mean now anyway? What does this one mean if you live in a cul-de-sac with a wall around it? What does it mean if you're damned lucky to live in a cul-de-sac with a wall around it? Monday, June 16th, 2025. There was a long report on the radio today about the findings of the big Anglo-Japanese cosmological station on the moon. The station, with its vast array of telescopes and some of the most sensitive spectroscopic equipment ever made, has detected more planets orbiting nearby stars. That station has been detecting new worlds for a dozen years now, and there's even evidence that a few of the discovered worlds may be life-bearing. I've listened to and read every scrap of information I could find on this subject, and I've noticed that there's less and less argument against the likelihood that some of these worlds are alive. The idea is gaining scientific acceptance. Of course, no one has any idea whether the extrasolar life is anything more than a few trillion microbes. People speculate about intelligent life, and it's fun to think about, but no one is claiming to have found anyone to talk to out there. I don't care. Life alone is enough. I find it more exciting and encouraging than I can explain, more important than I can explain. There is life out there. There are living worlds just a few light years away, and the United States is busy drawing back from even our nearby dead worlds, the moon and Mars. I understand why they are, but I wish they weren't. I suspect that a living world might be easier for us to adapt to and live on without a long, expensive umbilical to Earth. Easier, but not easy. Still, that's something, because I don't think there could be a multi-light-year umbilical. I think people who traveled to extrasolar worlds would be on their own, far from politicians and business people, failing economies and tortured ecologies, and far from help, well out of the shadow of their parent world. Saturday, July 19th, 2025. Tomorrow, I'll be 16. Only 16. I feel older. I want to be older. I need to be older. I hate being a kid. Time drags. Tracy Dunn has disappeared. She's been depressed since Amy was killed. When she talked at all, it was about dying and wanting to die and deserving to die. Everyone kept hoping she would get over her grief or her guilt and get on with her life. Maybe she couldn't. Dad talked with her several times, and I know he was worried about her. Her crazy family hasn't been any help. They treat her the way that she treated Amy. They ignore her. The rumor is that she went outside sometime yesterday. A group of Moss and Payne kids say they saw her go out of the gate just after they left school. No one has seen her since. Sunday, July 20th, 2025. Here's the birthday gift that came into my mind this morning as I woke up. Just 2 lines. The destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars. This is what I was reaching for a few days ago when the story of the new planets being discovered caught my attention. It's true, of course, it's obvious. Right now, it's also impossible. The world is in horrible shape. Even rich countries aren't doing as well as history says rich countries used to do. President Donner isn't the only one breaking up and selling off science and space projects. No one is expanding the kind of exploration that doesn't earn an immediate profit or at least promise big future profits. There's no mood now for doing anything that could be considered unnecessary or wasteful, and yet, the destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars. I don't know how it will happen or when it will happen. There's so much to do before it can even begin. I guess that's to be expected. There's always a lot to do before you get to go to heaven. Chapter 8. To get along with God, consider the consequences of your behavior. Earthseed, the Books of the Living. Saturday, July 26th, 2025. Tracy Dunn has not come home and has not been found by the police. I don't think she will be. She's only been gone for a week, but a week outside must be like a week in hell. People vanish outside. They go through our gate like Mr. Yanis did, and everyone waits for them, but they never come back, or they come back in an urn. I think that Tracy Dunn is dead. Bianca Montoya is pregnant. It isn't just gossip, it's true, and it matters to me somehow. Bianca is 17, unmarried, and out of her mind about George Iterb, who lives in the Ibarra house and is Yolanda Ibarra's brother. George admits to being the father. I don't know why they didn't just get married before everything got so public. George is 23, and he, at least, ought to have some sense. Anyway, they're going to get married now. The Ibarra and Iterb families have been feuding with the Montoyas for a week over this. So stupid. You'd think they had nothing else to do. At least they're both Latino. No interracial feud this time. Last year, when Craig Dunn, who's white and one of the saner members of the Dunn family, was caught making love to C.D. Moss, who's black, and Richard Moss's oldest daughter, to boot, I thought someone was going to get killed. Crazy. But my point isn't who's sleeping with whom or who's feuding. My question is, how in the world can anyone get married and make babies with the way that things are, with things the way they are now? I mean, I know people have always gotten married and had kids, but now there's nowhere to go, nothing to do. A couple gets married, and if they're lucky, they get a room or a garage to live in, with no hope of anything better and every reason to expect things to get worse. Bianca's chosen life is one of my options. It's not one that I intend to exercise, but it is pretty much what the neighborhood expects of me, of anyone my age. Grow up a little more, get married, have babies. Curtis Talcott says the new Iturb family will get half a garage to live in after they marry. George's sister, Celia Iturb Cruz, and her husband and baby have the other half. 2 couples and not one paying job among them. The best they could hope for would be to move into some rich people's compound as domestic servants and work for room and board. There's no way to save any money or ever do any better. And what if they wanted to go north, try for a better life in Oregon or Washington or Canada? It would be much harder to travel with a baby or 2, and much more dangerous to try to sneak past hostile guards and over state lines or international borders with babies. I don't know whether Bianca is brave or stupid. She and her sisters are busy altering their mother's old wedding dress, and everyone's cooking and getting ready for a party, as though these were the good old days. How can they? I like Curtis Talcott a lot. Maybe I love him. Sometimes I think I do. He says he loves me. But if all I had to look forward to was marriage to him and babies and poverty that just keeps getting worse, I think I'd kill myself. Saturday, August 2nd, 2025. We had a target practice today, and for the first time since I killed the dog, we found another corpse. We all saw it this time, an old woman, naked, maggoty, half-eaten, and beyond disgusting. That did it for Ora Moss. She says she won't do any more target shooting, not ever. I tried talking to her, but she says it's the men's job to protect us anyway. She says that women shouldn't have to practice with guns. What if you have to protect your younger sisters and brothers? I asked her. She has to babysit them often enough. I already know enough to do that, she said. You get rusty without practice, I said. I'm not going out again, she insisted. It's none of your business. I don't have to go. I couldn't move her. She was afraid, and that made her defensive. Dad said that I should have waited until the memory of the corpse had faded, then tried to convince her. He's right, I guess. It's the Moss attitude that gets me. Richard Moss lets his wives and daughters pull things like this. He works them like slaves in his gardens and rabbit-raising operation and around the house, but he lets them pretend that they're ladies when it comes to any community effort. If they don't want to do their part, he always backs them up. This is dangerous and stupid. It's a breeding ground for resentment. No Moss woman has ever stood a watch. I'm not the only one who's noticed. The 2 oldest Payne kids went with us for the first time. Bad luck for them. They weren't scared off, though. Doyle and Margaret. There's a toughness to them. They're all right. Their uncle, Wardell Parrish, hadn't wanted them to go. He had made nasty comments about Dad's ego, about private armies and vigilantes, and about his taxes, how he had paid enough in his life to have a right to depend on the police to protect him. Blah, blah, blah. He's a strange, solitary, whiny man. I've heard that he used to be wealthy. Dad agrees with me that he can't be trusted. But he's not Doyle and Margaret's father, and their mother, Rosalie Payne, doesn't like anyone telling her how to raise her 5 kids. The only power she has in this world is her authority over her children and her money. She does have a little money inherited from her parents. Her brother has somehow lost his. So his trying to tell her what to do, or what she shouldn't let her kids do, was a dumb move. He should have known better, though for the kids' sake, I'm glad he didn't. My brother Keith begged to go with us as usual. He'll turn 13 in a few days, August 14th. And the thought of waiting 2 more years until he's 15 must seem impossible to him. I understand that. Waiting is terrible. Waiting to be older is worse than other kinds of waiting because there's nothing that you can do to make it happen faster. Poor Keith. Poor me. At least Dad lets Keith shoot at birds and squirrels with the family BB gun. But Keith still complains. It's not fair, he said today for the 20th or 30th time. Lauren's a girl and you let her go. You always let her do things. I could learn to help you guard and scare off robbers. He had once made the mistake of offering to help shoot robbers instead of scaring them off, and Dad all but preached him a sermon. Dad almost never hits us, but he can be scary without lifting a finger. Keith didn't go today, of course, and our practice went all right until we found the corpse. We didn't see any dogs this time. Most upsetting to me, though, there were a few more rag, stick, cardboard, and palm frond shacks along the way into the hills along the river street. There always seems to be more. They've never bothered us beyond begging and cursing, but they always stare so. It gets harder to ride past them. They're living skeletons, some of them, skin and bones and a few teeth. They eat whatever they can find up there. Sometimes I dream about the way that they stare at us. Back at home, my brother Keith slipped out of the neighborhood, out through the front gates and away. He stole Corey's key and took off on his own. Dad and I didn't know until we got home. Keith was still gone, and by then Corey knew that he must be outside. She had checked with others in the neighborhood, and two of the Dunn kid twins, Allison and Marie, age 6, said they saw him go out the gate. That was when Corey went home and discovered that her key was gone. Dad, tired and angry and scared, was going to go right back out to look for him, but Keith got home just as Dad was leaving. Corey, Marcus, and I had gone to the front porch with Dad, all three of us speculating about where Keith had gone, and Marcus and I volunteering to go with Dad to help search. It was almost dark. You get back in that house and stay there, Dad said. It's bad enough to have one of you out there. He checked the submachine gun and made sure that it was fully loaded. Dad, look, I said. I had spotted something moving 3 houses down, quick, shadowy movement alongside the Garfield porch. I didn't know it was Keith. I was attracted by its furtiveness. Someone was sneaking around trying to hide. Dad was quick enough to see the movement before it was hidden by the Garfield house. He got up at once, took the gun, and went to check. The rest of us watched and waited. Moments later, Corey said she heard an odd noise in the house. I was too focused on Dad and what was going on outside to hear what she heard or to pay any attention to her. She went in. Marcus and I were still on the porch when she screamed. Marcus and I glanced at each other, then at the front door. Marcus lunged for the door. I yelled for Dad. Dad was out of sight, but I heard him answer my call. Come quick, I shouted. Then I ran into the house. Corey, Marcus, Bennett, and Gregory were in the kitchen, clustered around Keith. Keith was sprawled, panting on the floor, wearing only his underpants. He was scraped and bruised, bleeding and filthy. Corey knelt beside him, examining him, questioning him, crying. What happened to you? Who did this? Why did you go outside? Where are your clothes? Where's the key you stole? Dad cut in. Did they take it from you? Everyone jumped, looked up at Dad and then down at Keith. I couldn't help it, Keith said, still panting. I couldn't, Daddy. There were 5 guys. So they got the key. Keith nodded, careful not to meet Dad's eyes. Dad turned and strode out of the house, almost at a run. It was too late now to get George or Brian Hisu to change the gate lock. That would have to be done tomorrow, and new keys made and passed out. I thought Dad must be going out to warn people and to put more watchers on duty. I wanted to offer to help alert people, but I didn't. Dad looked too angry to accept help from one of his kids right then. And when he got back, Keith was in for it. Was he ever in for it? A pair of pants gone, and a shirt, and a pair of shoes. Corey had never been willing to let us run around barefoot the way a lot of kids did, except in the house. Her definitions of being civilized did not involve dirty, heavily calloused feet any more than they involved dirty, diseased skin. Shoes were expensive, and we were always growing out of ours. But Corey insisted. Each of us had at least one pair of wearable shoes, in spite of what they cost, and they cost a lot. Now money would have to be found to get an extra pair for Keith. Keith curled up on the floor, smudging the tile with blood from his nose and mouth, hugging himself and crying now that Dad was gone. It took Corey 2 or 3 minutes to get him up and half carry him to the bathroom. I tried to help her, but she stared at me like I was the one who beat him up, so I let them alone. It wasn't as though I wanted to help. I just thought I should. Keith was in real pain, and it was hard for me to endure sharing it. I cleaned up the blood so that no one would slip in it or track it around. Then I fixed dinner, ate, fed the 3 younger boys, and put the rest aside for Dad, Corey, and Keith. Sunday, August 3rd, 2025. Keith had to confess what he had done this morning at church. He had to stand up in front of the whole congregation and tell them everything, including what the 5 thugs had done to him. Then he had to apologize to God, to his parents, and to the congregation that he had endangered and inconvenienced. Dad made him do that over Corey's objections. Dad never hit him, though last night he must have been tempted. Why would you do such a thing? He kept demanding. How could any son of mine be so stupid? Where are your brains, boy? What did you think you were doing? I'm talking to you. Answer me. Keith answered and answered and answered, but the answers never seemed to make much sense to Dad. I ain't no baby no more, he wept. Or, I wanted to show you, just wanted to show you. You always let Lauren do stuff. Or, I'm a man. I shouldn't be hiding in the house, hiding in the wall. I'm a man. It went on because Keith refused to admit that he had done anything wrong. He wanted to show that he was a man and not a scared girl. It wasn't his fault that a gang of guys jumped him, beat him, robbed him. He didn't do anything. It wasn't his fault. Dad stared at him in utter disgust. You disobeyed, he said. You stole. You endangered the lives and the property of everyone here, including your mother, your sister, and your little brothers. If you were the man you think you are, I'd beat the hell out of you. Keith stared straight ahead. Bad guys come in even if they don't have a key, he muttered. They come in and they steal stuff. It's not my fault. It took Dad 2 hours to get Keith to admit that it was his fault. No excuses. He'd done wrong, and he wouldn't do it again. My brother is not very smart, but he makes up for it in pure stubbornness. My father is smart and stubborn. Keith didn't have a chance, but he made Dad work for his victory. The next morning, Dad had his revenge. I don't believe he thought of Keith's forced confession that way, but Keith's expression told me that he did. How do I get out of this family? Marcus muttered to me as we watched. I sympathized. He had to share a room with Keith, and the 2 of them, only a year apart in age, fought all the time. Now things would be worse. Keith is Corey's favorite. If you asked her, she would say that she didn't have a favorite, but she does. She babies him and lets him get away with skipping chores, a little lying, a little stealing. Maybe that's why Keith thinks when he screws up that it's okay. This morning's sermon was on the 10 Commandments with extra emphasis on honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt not steal. I think Dad got rid of a lot of anger and frustration preaching that sermon. Keith, tall, stone-faced, looking older than his 13 years, kept his anger. I could see him keeping it inside, holding it down. choking on it. Chapter 9. All struggles are essentially power struggles. Who will rule? Who will lead? Who will define, refine, confine, design? Who will dominate? All struggles are essentially power struggles, and most are no more intellectual than two rams knocking their heads together. Earthseed, The Books of the Living, Sunday, August 7th, 2025. My parents' usual good judgment failed them this week on my brother Keith's birthday. They gave him his own BB gun. It wasn't new, but it worked, and it looked much more dangerous than it was. It was his. He didn't have to share it. I suppose it was intended to make him feel better about the 2 years he still had to wait until he got his hands on the Smith & Wesson, or better yet, the Heckler & Koch. And of course, it was supposed to help him get over his stupid desire to sneak out and the humiliation of his public confession. Keith shot a few more pigeons and crows, threatened to shoot Marcus. Marcus just told me about that tonight. Then yesterday, he took off for parts unknown. He took the BB gun with him, of course. No one has seen him for about 18 hours, and there's not much doubt that he's gone outside again. Monday, August 18th, 2025. Dad went out looking for Keith today. He even called in the police. He says he doesn't know how we'll afford the fee, but he's scared. The longer Keith is gone, the more likely he is to get hurt or killed. Marcus says that he thinks Keith went looking for the guy who beat him up. I don't believe it. Not even Keith would go looking for 5 guys, or even one guy with nothing but a BB gun. Corey's even more upset than Dad. She's scared and jumpy and sick to her stomach, and she keeps crying. I talked her into going back to Ben. Then I taught her classes myself. I've done that 4 or 5 times before when she was sick, so it wasn't too weird for the kids. I just used Corey's lesson plans, and during the first part of the day, I partnered the older kids with my kindergartners and let everyone get a taste of teaching or learning from someone different. Some of my students are my age and older, and a couple of these, Ora Moss and Michael Talcott, got up and left. They knew I understood the work. I got the last of my high school work and tests out of the way almost 2 years ago. Since then, I've done uncredited, free college work with Dad. Michael and Ora know all that, but they're much too grown up to learn anything from the likes of me. The hell with them. It's a pity that my Curtis has to have a brother like Michael. Not that any of us gets to choose our brothers. Tuesday, August 19th, 2025. No sign of Keith. I think Corey has gone into mourning for him. I handled classes again today, and Dad went out searching again. He came home looking exhausted tonight, and Corey wept and shouted at him. "You didn't try," she said, with me and all 3 of my brothers looking on. We'd all come to see whether Dad had brought Keith back. "You could have found him if you tried." Dad tried to go to her, but she backed away, still shouting, "If it were your precious Lauren out there alone, you would have found her by now. You don't care about Keith." She's never said anything like that before. I mean, we were always Corey and Lauren. She never asked me to call her mother, and I never thought to do it. I always knew she was my stepmother, but still I always loved her. It mystified me that Keith was her favorite, but it didn't make me love her any less. I was her kid, but not her kid, not quite, not really. But I always thought she loved me. Dad shooed us all off to bed. He quieted Corey and took her back to their room. A few minutes ago, he came to see me. "She didn't mean it," he said. "She loves you as though you were her daughter, Lauren." I just looked at him. She wants you to know that she's sorry." I nodded, and after a few more assurances, he went, "Is she sorry? I don't think so." "Did she mean it?" "She did. Oh yes, she meant it. Shit." Thursday, August 30th, 2025. Keith came back last night. He just walked into the house during dinner as though he'd been outside playing football instead of gone since Saturday. And this time, he looked fine. Not a mark on him. He was wearing a clean new set of clothing, even new shoes. All of it was of much better quality than he had when he left, and much more expensive than we could have afforded. He still had the BB gun until Dad took it away from him and smashed it. Keith wouldn't say where he'd been or how he'd gotten the new things, so Dad beat him bloody. I've only seen Dad like that once before, when I was 12. Corey tried to stop him, tried to pull him off Keith, screaming at him in English, then in Spanish, then without words. Gregory threw up on the floor and Bennett started to cry. Marcus backed away from the whole scene and slipped out of the house. Then it was over. Keith was crying like a 2-year-old and Corey was holding him. Dad stood over both of them looking dazed. I followed Marcus out the back door and stumbled and almost fell down the back steps. I didn't know what I was doing. Marcus wasn't around. I sat on the steps in the warm darkness and let my body shake and hurt and vomit in helpless empathy with Keith. Then I guess I passed out. I came to sometime later with Marcus shaking me and whispering my name. I got up with Marcus hanging on to my arm, trying to steady me, and I got to my bedroom. "Let me sleep in here," he whispered once I was sitting on my bed, dazed and still in pain. "I'll sleep on the floor, I don't care." "All right," I said, not caring where he slept. I lay down on the bed, without taking off even my shoes, and drew my body into a fetal ball on top of the bedclothes. I either fell asleep that way, or I passed out again. Saturday, October 25th, 2025. Keith has gone outside again. He went yesterday afternoon. Corey didn't admit until tonight that he took not only her key this time, but her gun. He took the Smith & Wesson. Dad refused to go out and look for him. Dad slept in his office last night. He's sleeping there again tonight. I never liked my brother much. I hate him now for what he's doing to the family, for what he's doing to my father. I hate him. Damn, I hate him. Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Keith came home tonight while Dad was visiting over the Talcott house. I suspect that Keith hung around and watched the house and waited until Dad left. He had come to see Corey. He brought her a lot of money done up in a fat roll. She stared at it, then looked, and then took it dazed. "So much, Keith," she whispered. "Where did you get it?" "It's for you," he said. "All for you, not him." He took her hand and closed it around the money, and she let him do it, though she had to know that it must be stolen money or drug money or worse. Keith gave Bennett and Gregory big, expensive bars of milk chocolate with peanuts. He just smiled at Marcus and me, an obvious fuck you smile. Then, before Dad could come home and find him here, he left again. Corey hadn't realized that he was leaving again, and she all but screamed and clung to him. "No! You'll be killed out there! What's the matter with you? Stay home!" "Mama, I won't let him beat me again," he said. "I don't need him hitting me and telling me what to do. Pretty soon I'll be able to make more money in a day than he can in a week, maybe in a month." "You'll be killed." "No, I won't. I know what I'm doing." He kissed her. Then, with surprising ease, took her arms from around him. "I'll come back and see you," he said. "I'll bring you presents." And he vanished out the back door and was gone. 2026. Civilization is to groups what intelligence is to individuals. It is a means of combining the intelligence of many to achieve ongoing group adaptation. Civilization, like intelligence, may well serve adequately or fail to serve its adaptive function. When civilization fails to serve, it must disintegrate unless it's acted upon by unifying internal or external forces. Earthseed, the Books of the Living. Chapter 10. When apparent stability disintegrates, as it must, God is change. People tend to give in to fear and depression, to need and greed. When no influence is strong enough to unify people, they divide, they struggle, one against one, group against group, for survival, position, power. They remember old hates and generate new ones. They create chaos and nurture it. They kill and kill and kill until they are exhausted and destroyed, until they are conquered by outside forces, or until one of them becomes a leader most will follow, or a tyrant most fear. Earthseed, the Books of the Living. Thursday, June 25th, 2026. Keith came home yesterday, bigger than ever, as tall and lean as Dad is tall and broad. He's not quite 14, but he already looks like the man he wants so much to be. We're like that, we Olaminas. Tall, sturdy, fast-growing people. Except for Gregory, who is only 9, we all tower over Corey. I'm still the tallest, but my height seems to annoy her these days. She loves Keith's size, though, her big son. She just hates the fact that he doesn't live with us anymore. I got a room, he said to me yesterday. We talked, he and I. Corey was with Dortia Cruz, who is one of her best friends and who had just had another baby. The other boys were playing in the street and on the island. Dad had gone to the college and would be gone overnight. Now, more than ever, it's safest to go out just at dawn and not to try coming home until just at dawn the next morning. That's if you have to go outside at all, which Dad does about once a week. The worst parasites still prowl at night and sleep into the morning, yet Keith lives outside. I got a room in a building with some other people, he said. Translation: he and his friends were squatting in an abandoned building. Who were his friends? A gang? A flock of prostitutes? A bunch of astronauts flying high on drugs? A den of thieves? All of the above. Whenever he came to see us, he brought money to Corey and little gifts to Bennett and Gregory. How could he get money? There's no honest way. Do your friends know how old you are? I asked. He grinned. Hell no. Why should I tell them that? I nodded. It does help to look older sometimes. You want something to eat? You gonna cook for me? I've cooked for you hundreds of times. Thousands. I'm going to stop there because it is 10 o'clock and my phone is going nuts to tell me that. Okay.